Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Kevin. I'm the training coordinator here with the Association of State Floodplain Managers. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today. Today we're going to be talking about the CTP program and getting a perspective from several different cooperating technical partners. But before we get into the topic today, I do have a few administrative announcements I want to go over with you. So number one, we have a really large group here, so we're obviously not going to be able to unmute lines and hear any questions or comments you have, but we do want your participation. So if you do have a question about anything you see today, or a comment for that matter, please navigate to the Q&A area of the Zoom interface here and go ahead and put it into the Q&A area. There's also a chat that may be disabled, but in any case, we won't be monitoring that chat area as closely. So the Q&A area is where you want to be if you have a question that you want asked or answered rather, and we'll try to be saving questions until the end. So if you ask something in the next 5 minutes, just sit tight. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can at the end, kind of as time allows there. Um, a note on continuing education credits and certificates of attendance and so forth. This is approved for one CEC for CFMs. That credit, if you're national level CFM, will get applied to your records automatically. Um, we'll also be issuing certificates of attendance for anyone who sticks with us for the entire event today. That'll be emailed to you, so you'll have it if you need it for other licenses or for your state or whatever. Um, That'll come with any promised follow-up from today's event or any resources we might want to share that'll be sent to you via email in the next week or two. Um, just a reminder that this is a quarterly webinar series, so if you have ideas you might want to see presented on, you can email Alan at floods.org, and we're always looking out for new topics. So please send any ideas you may have to him, and we'll take those in stride. Um, with that, and speaking of Alan, I'll introduce him now. Alan Lulloff is a senior project manager in our Flood Science Center here at ASFPM. Alan's going to tell us a little bit about the CTP subcommittee, our topic today, and the speakers we have presenting for you. So Alan, go ahead and take it away.
Yes, ASFPM passed a resolution in support of the Board of Directors passed a resolution in support of the Cooperating Technical Partner Program, I think about 7 years ago. And after that, they opted to create a subcommittee under the Mapping and Engineering Standards Committee called the Cooperating Technical Partners Subcommittee. And that's co-chaired by Joanna Rohlf with the state of Kansas, and Annie Razo with the Texas Water Development Board. And you can see the primary goals of the CTP subcommittee. And one of the major things we do is put on these quarterly webinars, as Kevin mentioned. And we've been very fortunate. We get a large number of attendees participate, and we really appreciate that. And so today, we're going to be talking about, some perspectives from CTPs from several regions. And we're really fortunate to have Laura Algeo, who is formerly with FEMA and formerly the manager of the Cooperating Technical Partner Program at FEMA. She's now with SNA Partners, and we're very, very pleased to have her on board because she's been a great person to manage this program and done wonderful efforts to move it along. In addition, we have Joanna Rohlf with the state of Kansas, Manny Razo with the Texas Water Development Board, and also the two co-chairs of the Mapping and Engineering Standards Committee, Brooke Seymour with the Mile High Flood District in Colorado, and Glenn Haystand with the Illinois State Water Survey. So with that, Laura will begin the presentation. And Wisconsin was fortunate to become a cooperating technical partner very early on in the process, and it's been a wonderful program for the state and for the nation.
Laura, you're muted.
I know. I had it all set up and then like the microphone moved when I shared my screen. I was like, oh crap. Um, Thank you, Alan. I appreciate the introduction. My name is Laura Algeo. I did used to oversee the Cooperating Technical Partners Program. I have to say, I have to be clear that I am not a federal employee. I no longer work for FEMA. So I am sharing information about the Cooperating Technical Partners Program from my perspective through history and through the program being developed and in that past history. I am currently, though, a managing partner at S&A Partners LLC. So just want to make sure that's clear and there's no boundaries crossed there. So the CTP program, obviously the hopefully I'm preaching to the choir when I say this. It's a capacity building program really focused on collaboration and education. So it was developed to try to enhance community capacity, providing education and workforce development so that it could drive local innovation and really start to have a holistic approach that would then empower communities to really be able to thrive through rapidly changing environments, through be it disaster situations or any other situations that they may find themselves in. So some of the history of the program, back in the late 1900s, for those of us who hate to hear it said that way, it became very clear federal government had not had a lot of funding provided to mapping budgets over the years. It had all been out of flood insurance fees. And so many of the studies that had been done in the late 60s and 70s and into the early 80s were becoming out of date. And there weren't enough funds to complete some of that. In the interim, what we found, excuse me, and again, I'm going to try not to say we because I am not a federal employee, but it is going to probably challenge me. So I will try to refrain from that. But if you hear we, just ignore the we and we'll move on. But so the federal government decided what they had seen at that time was that a lot of communities were beginning to do work to maximize other outcomes for their communities, such as areas like Denver, Charlotte, Mecklenburg, Hillsborough County, Florida. They were doing water studies for their local drainage issues. They were doing water studies for quality issues through the EPA. And so FEMA wanted to really take advantage of those organizations that were doing a lot of that work and had that expertise. And by providing some training and information on our guidance and standards, on their guidance and standards, they could then have that community produce products that would be in compliance with FEMA as well as the other things and really save those federal dollars. So what that led to was really trying to foster these partnerships so that enabled the federal government to prioritize that flood data development, as well as be able to influence the information with a local preference and see measurable outcomes at the local level. So the program started as the CTC program, Cooperating Technical Communities. Again, from what I just mentioned, the focus was on these communities that already had this knowledge and were doing flood hazard studies, but maybe they didn't know the FEMA processes, they didn't know the FEMA regulations as well. And so they really needed just some more information and some more cooperation together in order to get a product that would be useful for those multitude of uses. So the first partner to sign up was Denver Urban Drainage, which is now Mile High Flood District. They were the first to sign up in May of 1999, and they beat out, and I'll say this because I was with Region 4 at the time, they beat out Charlotte Mecklenburg by like 3 months. So to be the first CTP, but Charlotte Mecklenburg was very closely on their heels. CTC, as we moved into the early 2000s, FEMA rolled out its program called Map Modernization, really trying to influence and infuse some funding into the mapping process to get it more current across the board for the nation. As that Map Modernization program ramped up, there were more states and more regional entities that were showing interest in joining the CTC program at the time. And so because some of the states did not feel that the term community was really in line with them, or as you got to regional organizations, that didn't seem to make a fit, the program changed to the Cooperating Technical Partners program to be more inclusive and to ensure that those other partners were more clearly identified. I have on here kind of fun fact. There was only one state that ever entered into an agreement, has a signed memorandum of agreement as a cooperating technical state. We don't have chat, as Kevin said, but spoiler, it was the state of North Carolina. But but once we went through that process with the states, the determination was made to change the program to the CTP, given that evolving nature of the partnerships with map modernization, and that's where it stands as of today. So initially, the program allowed for NFIP participating communities. It allowed for some state and regional organizations that were serving NFIP communities, and it was rolled out, as I mentioned, as the CTC. When it switched over to the CTP in 2008, it also added some state coordinating agencies, some of the NFIP state coordinating agencies as allowable entities. And then you'll see further expansion in 2010 and 2012, where some of the national nonprofits and the regional nonprofits were incorporated and allowed into the guidance for the award recommendations for those. So what are some of the fundable activities under the CTP program? So I will, again, preface this with there is not currently a notice of funding opportunity out, so I can't speak to what may come out in the next iteration of the notice of funding opportunity for the CTP. But what has historically been fundable activities in this program is the program management, which is really to help when you've got a state or regional or even a local, in some instances where there's a lot of different components that are a part of what's going on in the study and engagement across the communities, then they may need some additional assistance for program management to really oversee all of those things. So this is not intended to be project management. So like if you see the third one down, that flood risk project. If you're doing a flood risk project, you're actually doing H&H and modeling and trying to create a flood insurance rate map. That project management is included in that particular task. Program management is more for if you've got maybe 2 or 3 of those working, or you've got that plus some other things that you're implementing through the CTP program. You need to kind of keep an oversight of that program management. Similarly, for community outreach and mitigation strategies, often called comms, that one is focused on the outreach that is more broad than just the project. Again, within the flood risk project mapping activity statement, there are outreach components because there are requirements in the CFR about how you need to coordinate with folks that are getting an updated flood study from you. So that outreach is covered under that flood risk project. The community outreach mitigation strategies is really driven more towards you want to do training for several of your communities on how to utilize the database or how to understand what their mitigation opportunities might exist, or just training on how to do elevation certificates, other things like that, things that you might want to do outreach around the mapping process, but not specific to that particular project. The flood risk project, as I mentioned, is, just your traditional, I'm going to do a flood study, I'm going to do the hydrology, hydraulics, with the goal of creating a flood insurance rate map or base level engineering data for a community to use as the end product. And then last was the letter of map revision review partnership. So that is giving an opportunity to CTPs who demonstrate the capability to actually do some of the review and support the review of letters of map revision that come in and get submitted to the federal government. So historically, you heard this called like a delegation. It was not a delegation in the true sense of the word because the government can't delegate that authority to make that determination beyond itself. But a CTP will do all of those review steps and provide a recommendation to the federal government to then issue the letter of map revision. There are several partners that participate in the letter of map revision review partnership, and there are 10 currently. It started in 2001 with, again, Deborah Overdrainage was the first to sign up as the first letter of map revision partner. It was set up as a pilot to try to understand, could a local government, a regional organization take on kind of this responsibility? In 2006, after they'd been going for a while, the pilot was expanded to try to look at a larger state, in this instance, North Carolina, as well as a more single jurisdiction community, a smaller jurisdiction community, and this was Charlotte-Mecklenburg. Again, to try to understand the capacity of a local partner and a state partner, both with varying levels of letters of map revision that tend to come in, applications that come in, and different levels of state, local, and regional organization. So those transpired for about 3 years. And then in 2009, there was an attempt to get a few more partners to try to see if more broadly across the jurisdictions, again, adding a regional organization with the River Authority in San Antonio, another couple states, Alabama and Illinois, and then Harris County Flood Control District, again, to sort of expand the knowledge on how that could be done at a local level. Finally, in 2016, FEMA was able to aggregate all of the data, all of the information from those pilots over that 15-year period, and finalized a policy document rolling out the LOMAR review program. Since that has happened, since the official rollout and full application process has been started in 2016, there have been 3 new partners added: the Indiana DNR, Colorado, and Kentucky Division of Water. So that the policy paper is set up so that a training is held every 2 years. And then someone who's a CTP and meets all the criteria can apply for that. I believe the training did actually happen in March or April of 2025 for those that had shown interest, although I'm not sure, where that process is at now. So what are some of the values and benefits? I mean, there were values and benefits seen on both the federal side as well as the local side as the idea to roll this program came about. Obviously, being able to share resources, neither states, locals, or federal government always have the full amount of funding that is necessary to do any of the tasks that are assigned within their regulations or their guidance. And so being able to share those resources and work with each other is a huge value to all of the partners involved. Matching those local maps with FEMA maps, a lot of that data I mentioned that was happening and that data collection that was happening in the early 2000s was resulting in communities regulating to one map and then there being the FEMA map as a separate map. So an idea to really kind of match those products together. Getting access to existing FEMA data, making that closer collaboration with the federal government so that the partners could then access data, access training and technical assistance, mentoring, being able to collaborate more with the Federal Emergency Management Agency. In some of the grant programs, there was some mitigation grant credit if you were a CTP. I'm not sure where that stands with the current application cycles and what's out there. But that was something that was in place. Aid in getting those maps completed more efficiently. By working with locals, the federal government can more efficiently deliver maps in some cases where maybe the relationship between local and federal is not as good. Having some of that work done more at a local level really gets you able to manage and hire contractors that may be local to your community and give you more of a tailored approach and understand what your local needs are. And of course, the chance to influence policy and guidance by working with FEMA. And then there was some national and local recognition for being very progressive and proactive for floodplain management and flood hazard identification. So what are some of the key attributes of a strong partner? And these are historic, but I think going forward, these are really critical as well. I mean, that strong leadership at a local level, the best programs that I can think of that I've seen over the last 25 years are really led by someone who at a local level has determined that a very clear vision for where they want their community, regional organization, or state to go. And they've been able to push that forward and drive it to success by interacting and coordinating with other state organizations, regional, local, federal organizations to really drive that process. So you really need to have someone who is willing to kind of take that on and say, this is what is best for our community, and this is what we really need to be resilient and strong going forward. You also need to have processes and systems in place. Obviously, you can't have never even heard of hydrology or hydraulics, and then tomorrow say you want to be an engineer and do flood maps. There has to be some sort of processes and systems in place. You have to have that technical capability, or at least the capability to manage it well enough, right? You can't, if I were to go out and hire an electrical engineer to do something in my house, I would not do very well. I did have to take that class in civil engineering, and I did not do well. So it would not be smart for me to be the one questioning them, because I would not know the right things to ask. I would want to try to find probably my brother, who's better with that stuff, to ask those questions. So making sure that you have some technical capabilities. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to have on staff, but you have to have some capability so that you know that you're getting the best outcome for your community. Obviously, being a participant in good standing with the NFIP, financial management capabilities, that's a requirement of any federal grant, is to make sure that you can manage those finances effectively. And then any in-staff capabilities for your activities, so that you can make sure, again, that you've got people that know how to ask the right questions, and you put people in place that can be successful and not just be taking information and not really know what to do with it, and then you lose the value of kind of some of that partnership. So making sure that you have your staff in a place that they can handle that information. So when you think about some of the challenges and possibilities, I guess opportunities that can occur due to challenges over time, right? Like, I think consistency and transparency over history has been an issue, just with making sure that partners are able to consistently deliver and be transparent. I think this goes both ways, though. The federal government can have challenges with transparency at times, and so ensuring that that we're able to continue coordination and cooperation across the process, I think, is going to be one of the key challenges and possibilities for the future, to really ensure that that performance can be successful. Performance was really, recently has been really driving a lot of the notice of funding opportunity developments. And it will be interesting to see where kind of some of that plays out as the program goes forward and the next iteration gets issued. Laws and policies, there are we run into consistently in the past, the federal government has run into states or locals that may have different laws that are more restrictive or differing in nature than some of the federal laws. And so that can be a challenge if you're trying to deliver two different things that are trying to meet two of those different criteria. So that's always something to work on. Training, I think, is the big one, really ensuring that everybody has the capability and capacity to do the work that is being asked to be done. So when you come forth with that work to be done, like that, you have the knowledge of what the regulations are and the knowledge of what the expectations are. And that really leads into that integration and collaboration as well, like making sure that CTPs can stay integrated and collaborative with the federal government throughout the process. I think has always been a possibility, and I think it is a challenge as well to ensure that that's able to continue. The four main pillars of the CTP program that really have driven the program, I think this is from the operations plan, the last operations plan that was made. Local leadership and collaboration, I've mentioned that before. Program operations, ensuring that facilities are in place to ensure the program can continue and succeed. The annual solicitation, obviously, is a big one. and then continuous growth through training and knowledge sharing. The program is constantly 25 years. The program changed constantly. There was always iterations and updates. I would expect that to continue no matter where we were at with the cycle that we're in today. But like, there's always going to be that continuous growth, and so ensuring that training and knowledge sharing are happening, and partnerships amongst the CTPs, especially sharing that knowledge, and like you're going to hear the rest of today, is critical to ensure that everyone continue to grow and succeed. So those 4 pillars, through the local leadership, there's been the annual recognition program, the collaboration center, the technical mapping assistance call line. You can, provide support and coordinate with that. One thing I'll mention in relation to the collaboration center, those of you that are CTPs that have your logins, I would definitely make sure that you're checking and logging in periodically, even if there's not, even no matter what the level of information being put on that site today is, as long as you have access, you'll have access to those resources that were there. And so if your password expires or it lapses for some reason, the reality is there are fewer staff at the federal government right now, so the timing and when you can get that back could be extensive. So that's just a little plug there to make sure that you're going out and checking your logins and making sure that you are going into the system so that you don't lose access to a lot of that knowledge and information. A lot of the things I'm going to talk about here are there in documentation, so you don't want to lose access to that. The CTP feedback survey, to improve program operations, that survey was done on a 5-year cycle with a 5-year operations plan. The annual solicitation, obviously, updated annually with updated mapping activity statements and scopes of work to ensure that CTPs could apply for the funding. And then that continual improvement through knowledge and training. There's the EMI special topics courses. Again, all of those materials from past classes are out on the collaboration site. You can access those and look at those. So even, if you find yourself kind of wondering, oh, how did I do that thing? It may be out there because it's part of that EMI course information. The engineering mapping COP, there was participation in that, collaborating with regional best practices and sharing that information on FEMA.gov as well as the collaboration site. The community of practice, an independent study course, which is still also out and live on the EMI course, on the EMI site. I'm assuming, I don't believe they've taken down any of that training. So that's still a good resource if you have new staff to take that CTP 101. And then all of the webinars recorded over the last several years are out on that collaboration site. So if you have a topic that you were trying to scratch your brain about how something was done, it may be out there through the webinar. So through a recorded webinar. So it's also still a very good resource. Because of all of that, I mentioned we had Denver urban drainage and now Mile High, as well as Charlotte-Mecklenburg, that started in 1999. As of 2023, there were 304 documented CTP partners. Not all of those are funded on any given year. Not all of them want to be funded on any given year. But there were about 69 awardees in 23 for about $85 million. I believe 24 was pretty similar to that. That the documentation never got finalized for that. So I don't think there was a pamphlet issued for it, but it was about similar. So from 1999 to 2024, there was quite a bit of progress with getting a lot more people trained, aware, collaborative, even without receiving funding. There's a lot of partners out there that at least have access to resources and collaboration, things like this. So a good question is, where does that lead us into tomorrow? The CTP has more than 25 years of history, right? It was really started from the mindset of local governments that wanted to do something good for their communities. And that grassroots effort of those communities trying to do well for themselves has grown to over 300 individual organizations. So I think the CTP program in and of itself is just the community and the cooperation among folks, the support from ASFPM with the subcommittee. Like, I think it's just an amazing opportunity to share and grow your local organization and resilience. The local and state leadership in flood hazard awareness and risk is very much in line with current policies. So if you listen to anything in the news, the current policies that the administration states is that there's more local and state leadership. I can't think of a better place to go than to see a great example of state and local leadership at its best, doing what it's intended to do than the CTP program. And then I just kind of leave you with a quote from Maya Angelou that, no one will advocate for you as well as you can advocate for yourself. So just remembering to continue to advocate for yourselves, work on what you know is in the best interest of your organizations, and embrace this community that you have of the CTP across the board. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, and you're going to get to hear more about some of the examples of some of what CTPs are doing. And the first up with that is going to be Joanna Rohlf from Kansas.
Thanks, Laura. That was great. I enjoyed that presentation. And I'll get this shared, my screen shared. Everybody see my slides?
We see the slides. It's not in PowerPoint. It's not in presentation mode though yet, Joanna.
Yeah, so let me try and reshare because I put it in presentation mode, but last time, when we were testing, it did it right. But okay, hopefully this works. Okay.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right. My name is Joanna Rohlf. I'm the floodplain mapping coordinator with the Kansas CTP program. So I manage our CTP program. We are within the Kansas Department of Agriculture, which is where the Division of Water Resources is located. So that's where we sit. We are in Region 7, and I thought it'd be helpful to list all the Region 7 CTPs. It's a very active CTP region. Each state has a CTP program that's active and does a lot of work. And then there are a few municipalities, counties, or a natural resource district as well that does CTP work that's current and active. I know in the beginning stages, there were some others that are no longer active, but those are the ones that are active now. So in preparing for this presentation, I tried to do a little research into what went on before the CTP program. In Kansas, we have a lot of water law that's been implemented since early 1900s. Statutes and regulations have existed and still exist within the state that include regulation of floodplain activities. Some of those activities are very adjacent to what the NFIP requires. And so even if we have communities that do not participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, they still have to abide by state laws. And as a result of that, any efforts to really get some good mapping for the state were kind of not seen as a priority. But the 1993 floods that occurred across Midwest for the Missouri and Mississippi watershed areas was a lot of the driving force behind getting better and more mapping in the state. But at the time, they looked at programs like cash match programs to explore options. And due to those water law that we do have, it was really challenging to get state match dollars to get those kind of programs going, to get a mapping program going. I'm not aware of any actual success in that, but there could have been some success at maybe a community level. And just as we do now today, I we worked with our neighboring states to try and push for action, and I think push, get ideas and help each other out. I was able to talk to somebody that was involved in those early efforts, and that's kind of felt very similar to where some of us might feel like we are today. Um, so we became a CTP in September of 1999, so pretty early on in that program. I tried to find status maps from early projects. The earliest map I could find was from 2005. At that time, we had about half of the state mapped in some form, and only one of those was digital at the time. So a lot of the early efforts were to have digital mapping for um, the the studies. I know there was some studies that occurred like in the early 2000s, like for individual reaches or individual watersheds. But this is about the time when we started getting a lot more mapping going in different counties and countywide studies going on. Our CTP program is pretty much fully funded through the CTP grant. We do have 3 different scopes of work. As Laura mentioned, there were 4 different options. We have 3 of them. We have a program management scope of work where we find 2 positions fully and another position halfway is funded through that. And we do fund those positions split between the 2 program management and comms scope of work. Within the communication and mitigation strategies, we do have done pilot projects, specialized training such as like HECRAS, 2D modeling training, for example. We've had a very strong mitigation technical assistance program where communities have been able to look at alternative analysis for different types of mitigation solutions. We also have website support and technical application support through the comms scope of work. And a lot of these, or most of these activities, we do get contractor support. So we do contract out most of the actual work that gets done for those kind of activities. And then the bulk of our work is within a mapping activity statement for updating regulatory maps. So that's a lot of what we have going on nowadays. And we do these projects from beginning to end. We start with BLE discovery and scoping type discussions, and we'll take them all the way through an effective map. Produce flood risk products. And we have performed base level engineering in the past, but we have completed those efforts. And again, this work is done through contractor support. One of those applications that is funded under the COM scope of work is our BFE portal. This is where any resident or contractor or like surveyor can go in and make a request for a base flood elevation in a zone A area. And we've had this application since 2017 and had more than 5,000 requests since then. So it's been a very popular application for us. And it's really sometimes highlighted where we need to do new mapping when we have a lot of requests, because these are usually for a LOMA. It might be for new development or other reasons, elevation certificates, for example. People can also make data requests through here. It's been really useful to have a place that documents all those kind of requests. Another website we maintain, which is done in-house, is our effective floodplain viewer. It's a little different than what the National Flood Hazard Layer is, because we do show things slightly different on it. We have address points that we bring in from our NG 911 group in a different state agency. We also include like watershed boundaries and other types of layers that you can't find in the National Flood Hazard Layer. So additionally, like we'll show we have a layer where you can turn on cross-section stationing. So rather than getting the label for the water surface elevation or the lettered cross-section, you can see what the stationing is for it, for example. And for any of those Zone A areas where the modeling and mapping has a LiDAR-based map, we do include those approximate base flood elevations also as a layer on here. Each of our project areas, we include a similar type map, and this is where we'll take comments from communities as we go through a mapping project. And just a few status maps to show where we're at with the process. We are not, I wish I could say we were completely mapped with regulatory maps, but we are fully, completely mapped with at least base level engineering. So all these areas that are white counties that don't have anything going on in them do have at least some sort of flood risk information that has been produced through the CTP program. And all these areas that are in green or in the darker blue are in active mapping projects. And this is just our actual projects. So all the watershed areas are outlined in blue, and then they've broken into countywide or some community-based projects. And this one was meant to be a status of our 2D modeling. We have basically 2D modeling available across the whole state, but it doesn't seem to be coming up on my end. I don't know if you guys can see it. I'm not sure why that is.
No, I'm just seeing a blank slide.
Okay. It was there. Oh, wait. It was like, I think it was an animation. Okay. And so this is we have 2D modeling basically across the whole state. There would be like some isolated areas where we did 1D Zone AE modeling that we didn't really get, and it's new, so we didn't really do a new 2D model there. And then Johnson County is one of their own CTPs, so they're working on their own projects. And that's all I wanted to share. It's not everything we're doing, but I didn't want to take up too much time. And so the next presenter is going to be Manny from Texas.
Okay. Is the screen working? Am I sharing the right one?
Yeah, it looks good, Manny.
All right, perfect. Okay, so thanks guys for being here today and joining us. So my name is Manuel Razo. I am the Assistant Director for Flood Science and Community Assistance Division here at the Water Development Board. I'm just going to give you kind of a little bit of history on kind of our CTP program, but also in light of all the things that are happening right now, kind of at the federal level and not uncertainty on the funding, I just wanted to kind of share how we have kind of evolved over the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years, funding wise, where our money comes from and things like that. I know when we had a couple of the CTP kind of meetings over the past couple months, I sent some information to one or two of the other CTPs that were kind of curious about our legislation and things like that. So I'm going to kind of cover mainly that part of it on our end. But just to give you all some perspective, so Texas is in FEMA Region 6, which consists of Texas, New Mexico, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. All the other states are CTPs. We have more CTPs in the state of Texas than the other ones combined. So these are the ones that we have in the state. So we have 5 cities. We have 4 special districts. Then we have one of the universities, Texas A&M. And if there's anybody from those folks here, I want to get credit for putting it in maroon. I'm just trying to get some bonus points because my son just applied to school there. So we're hoping he gets accepted. Anyway, and then of course, us as the CTP for the state of Texas. We have collaborated with a few of the other CTPs, mainly the districts. We've worked with San Antonio River Authority on completing some BLEs jointly. We worked with North Central Texas Council of Governments. They did more of the comms, and we did the BLE for one of the watersheds that they were working in, and Harris County Flood Control. We've leveraged some of their data for the detailed engineering analyses that feed into farm production. So we try to collaborate with them as much as possible. I'm really grateful. You would probably think like, wow, that's a lot of CTPs, the funding, but I'm grateful to all these because if you look in, well, if you're not familiar with Texas, but all these CTPs are in a majority of the populated areas of the state. So because they're focused on those areas, it allows me to focus on the rural areas of the state. So I think it's a great kind of balance for a state as large as ours. Texas A&M Community Watershed Partners, we've worked with them. We pulled some money down and they did some discovery for us. So it's worked out well. I don't know if I mentioned, we've been a CTP since October of 2000. So we've been around for a while. We mainly started doing data acquisition for FEMA. So we would like get the base map data, some of the LiDAR data and terrain data, back in the day when we originally started. And we've kind of evolved into doing projects. So over the past 5 years, we've spent about $35 million in state dollars for BLE production. So we're trying to get full BLE coverage of the state 2D. We're almost there. It's just wrapping up some things because of some of the slowdowns at the federal level. We've gotten a little bit behind in getting some of the data uploaded and things to the EBFE viewer that we work with FEMA and the USGS on. But for the most part, we have full BLE coverage. So that's kind of CTP as a whole. We do some of the comms, just like Joanna was talking about. We do the BLE, of course, and then the detailed engineering analysis that goes into the firm production. Our region, I think, is unique that we don't do the CTPs. In Region 6, do not do the due process. They don't do the actual firm production. That's just the way our region has operated. If that will change now with some changes at the federal level and a lot of people leaving and things like that, I don't know. But that's kind of how we operate at the moment. So now to talk about funding. Like I said, there was a conversation I had with some of the folks in some of the meetings we had before. So some of the funding that we get comes from the maintenance taxes. So Texas Insurance Code, I'm not going to read this, but in this specific code, there is a floodplain management account that was established in the Texas Water Code. And every biennium, so our legislature meets every 2 years. So every biennium, we get $3.05 million, and it gets put into the into an account for us to use. Now, back in 2007 is when the Community Assistance Program came to the Water Development Board, and that's when kind of the CTP program, although it had been happening there, it started to get some momentum. And so it was funding all that. So it was funding staff, it was funding LiDAR acquisition, some other base map data, and it was funding a small portion for a few staff that were doing CTP. And so this is kind of where that money comes from. I don't know if, I'm sure the folks will share these slides out. All the links are there. You can click if you want to go and do some fun reading. It's long. Understanding statute is entertaining in itself. But this is kind of where the initial pot of money came from, was from the Texas Insurance Code and maintenance taxes that were charged. So then, for you folks that have been around a while, back in 2015, we had some really devastating floods in the state, not too far from actually where I live, here in Hays County in the city of Wimberley. The water went up about 40 feet. There was a lot of people that were lost. And so that got the legislature and the governor's attention. And we got a small appropriation of money at the time. And it went into this kind of floodplain management account. And so that was kind of the initial kickoff of things. And then 2 years later, everybody saw the Hurricane Harvey and all the flooding that happened there. And that really got folks' attention. So at that time, the legislature met and they gave the Water Development Board this kind of new edict that you had to do, which was, we have a state flood plan that gets done every 5 years. They mimicked it to what we do already for the water plan, just to make sure we have water availability for the state. And so we've been doing that for the past 5 years. And so we got this pot of money into the floodplain management account. It's not dedicated money, so we have to go and ask at each session for them to kind of replenish it. And so the money gets split between us, and I also get split, and by us, I mean the science side. So we do all the map production, all the kind of sciencey things. And then we have the other half, which is the planning side. And so they get half the money to do the regional flood plans and send money out to the 15 regional flood planning groups. So that money comes out of here. And this basically, the floodplain management account, if you see at the bottom, it says that we can use the money for the collection and analysis of flood-related information for flood planning, protection, mitigation, or adaptation, for outreach, and then to evaluate responses to any incidents that have affected property and things like that. So this kind of outlines what that money in that account allows us to do. And so that's where a majority of our base level engineering money has been spent, or has come from, that we've spent over the past, since about 2020-ish, right around there is when that came. So that's where we're at, about that $35 million, primarily on BLE. Now, along with this, during that time, they also created the Flood Infrastructure Fund. And I didn't want to share all the language that was in there, but it basically, the Flood Infrastructure Fund was created, and that section of the Texas Water Code, where it came from, and then there's also what it can be used for. So the Flood Infrastructure Fund was about $780 million. And basically we set up like a grant and loan program with that money. And so communities can come and apply for money to do studies, to do construction. They can also do it for like early warning systems and things like that. I don't work on that side of the funding, so I don't know all the details. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was we call them the Category 1 projects, which were the studies. So we're on our third cycle of the Flood Infrastructure Fund. And so some of the projects under the first cycle are wrapping up. So communities could come in, and if they knew they had areas that were flooding a lot and they wanted to understand what was happening, they could, and produce some projects out of that, they could come to us for that. And so now that some of those studies are wrapping up, what our hope is through the CTP program is to leverage those studies to update the firms. So those studies are not done to what I like to call FEMA standards. So we like to do additional things to those studies to get them FEMA ready, which typically involves doing additional QA/QC, a floodway analysis, maybe additional survey and cross sections and things like that, just so that they meet FEMA standards. We've been pretty successful with that over the years. Before we got the Flood Infrastructure Fund, we had another grant program called the Flood Protection Planning Grant. And so it was the same type of thing where the communities would come and ask us for money, and it would be like a 50-50 typically, and they would do some sort of study to identify, what the source of flooding was, identify mitigation projects. But we were able to leverage those studies, and that's typically how we've operated, at least for the detailed engineering analysis to support firms, is we would leverage those studies, pull down the federal CTP dollars, and do some additional work to get those FEMA ready, and then submit those to the region to update the firms. And so we're hoping, now that we're seeing some of these projects funded through the Flood Infrastructure Fund wrapping up, that we can do the same with those and take them to firm to help kind of keep our firms up to date. And I think that was my last slide. So I'm sure we're going to open it up to questions at the very end. So, but that's kind of us in a nutshell. And I think now I'm going to pass it off to Brooke from the Mile High Flood District.
Thanks, Manny. Let me get
Manny, I just wanted to mention before we go to Brooke is that I want to highlight what Region 6 has done, is created this BLE viewer that has been partnered with USGS, and it's a great asset that they've developed, and it's now other regions are using it too. So just wanted to highlight.
Region 9 is on there as well. But yeah, just do a quick search for BLE viewer, and it'll be the first one that comes up. And it's been through the Inform group with the region. So yeah, thanks.
Can you confirm that you're seeing the correct screen?
Yeah, it looks good, Brenda.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, hello everyone. I'm Brooke Seymour at the Mile High Flood District, and I appreciated the opportunity to hear from Joanna and Manny. And I'm glad to have an opportunity to share our experience. So I'm going to briefly walk through Mile High Flood District's approach to being a cooperating technical partner, how we manage local mapping, support FEMA adoption, and turn mapping into action. So first, a little background about who we are. The Mile High Flood District was formerly the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District. It was established in 1969 by state legislature following a devastating flood in Denver in 1965. That flood resulted in 21 lives lost and about 4 billion in damages. That event made it clear that a fragmented, every community for itself approach doesn't work. Our district was formed to bring regional coordination to flood risk. So this just shows the Mile High Flood District area within the state of Colorado. So it is a fairly small portion of the state, but it does cover the most populated area of the state, which is the greater Denver metro region. So zooming into our district boundary, we know that floods don't respect political boundaries, so regional consistency is essential. We serve parts of 7 counties, 33 municipalities, 3 million people. It's an area of 1,600 square miles, and we have 3,600 miles of named streams within our district boundary. We are funded by a mill levy and have an annual budget of about $90 million, although we actually manage more funds than that because we do require local government funding matches for our watershed planning projects and our capital improvement projects. So our mission is simple. It's to protect people, property, and our environment through preservation, mitigation, and education. And our core values are safety, community, stewardship, and learning. Mile High is involved in the full life cycle of flood risk. So from flood mapping and master planning to development services, which we do development review, but we also partner with developers to do sort of a fee and loop process where we're able to build stream projects on their behalf. We also, so capital projects, maintenance, acquisitions, flood warning, research, and education. This full spectrum involvement is what allows mapping to translate into action. So Mile High essentially operates as a program management agency, partnering with our local governments and hiring consultant teams to deliver our projects. Mile High provides the program leadership, quality management, and coordination. Consultants perform the technical execution and help drive innovation. And local governments are co-investors and the long-term owners and bring essential local insight. This alignment allows each partner to work to their strengths. It creates regional consistency, builds local expertise, and reinvests public dollars in our local economy. So I have this slide in. I know Laura provided a great overview of what a cooperating technical partner is. I just want to say that some of the key benefits that we see locally is that we're able to combine resources to maximize public funding. We're able to utilize our local knowledge and data, and then to be able to provide improved community engagement. So jumping into CTPs. So we've got we're part of Region 8. There are, we've got 5 CTPs that are active and have received grants within the region. So 2 within Colorado, so Mile High, but then also the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And then Montana, North Dakota, and Utah are also CTPs. So Mile High's role as a CTP, there's really 2 things that we do. First is as a LOMA review partner. This is the more traditional CTP model supported through a FEMA grant. We were the first in the nation to serve in this role, conducting local technical review of mapping revisions, so CLOMers and LOMers, on behalf of FEMA. We bring that regional knowledge and expertise and trusted relationships, and we're able to locally manage the review timelines, which is a big benefit. We also provide concierge-style support and training to improve submittal quality, which ultimately makes the program more efficient and less painful. um, and consistent with our program management structure, we do use contractor team to perform the technical reviews, and we fully direct our CTP grant funding to the review contractors. With no fiscal year 25 CTP grant, we're currently supporting this work with local funds to provide continuity. We will reassess this if fiscal year 26 funding is not released, but for now, service continues. The second way we operate as a CTP is that we prepare locally funded flood studies that are intentionally built for FEMA adoption. So these studies don't rely on a CTP grant, but they do require strong partnership with FEMA to transition into FEMA products. Our mapping starts locally. It's requested by communities and managed by Mile High, which gives local control over scope, schedule, and priorities. These studies get state approved for local regulation well before FEMA adoption. But from the beginning, they're developed with FEMA adoption in mind. We coordinate with FEMA as needed during the study, and then work closely through the physical map revision process to ensure successful integration into the national program. So a few by the numbers things, we process more than 50 letters of map change, so clomers and lomers per year. We have 9 recently completed flood studies that are advancing through physical map revisions to FEMA adoption. So it's actually being done, broken into 5 separate county PMRs. We have 30 active flood studies underway right now, which sounds like a lot, but our watersheds are much smaller than most other CTPs. Our studies are, very highly developed, very complex, so we break them into smaller watersheds. Although I will say 30 is still a lot to have ongoing at once. We work with 40 local floodplain administrators. That's the local floodplain administrators from each of our 40 local governments within our district. And we have 42,000 residents that are mapped in high hazard areas. We do provide targeted outreach on an annual basis to each of those residents and property owners to bring awareness to their flood risk and also provide actions they can take to be better prepared and help protect themselves from a flood. But ultimately, our goal is for communities to be safer, healthier, and more livable. Mapping is foundational. We have to understand our risk before we can act. But we all know that mapping alone doesn't reduce risk. We have to take action. So I want to share this one example of where we have data showing how mitigation pulled off. There has been significant investment in mitigation along Westerly Creek in the city of Aurora because of its history of flooding. 5 detention basins were constructed over several decades at a total cost of $50 million. This mitigation got tested in 2013 when 16 inches of rain fell in this watershed. We didn't avoid damages altogether. Actual damages are shown in blue on the right side, and in red you see the damages that would have been expected had we not implemented this mitigation. We avoided around $220 million in damages. So our work did its job with a benefit to cost ratio of 4.5 for just this one flood, let alone future floods. So to conclude, mapping is necessary. It's foundational to inform actions, and the actions become measurable impact. District-wide, we've invested about $3 billion in flood risk reduction. And that $3 billion is district funding, but it also includes all of the local government funding matches that we've been able to put into the ground in mitigation. The Mile High model demonstrates how locally driven mapping, aligned with strong federal partnership, leads to safer, healthier, and more livable communities. Thank you. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Glenn from Illinois.
And this is Alan Lulloff again. I want to thank you, Brooke, and also want to mention that the Colorado Water Development Board also has a website where they publish flood risk data. It's available to communities and it's used as a great resource for communities in Colorado. So just want to highlight what they're doing on providing access to the data and models.
Thanks for sharing that, Alan.
Hello, everybody. Is my slide deck coming through well?
I'm not seeing it
Can't
yet.
see it yet, Glenn.
Oh, well then. Good thing I asked.
Okay, now we can see the screen.
There you go there.
Yeah,
That
there
looks
we
good.
go.
There it is.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. I'm Glenn Heaston, and I am with the Illinois State Water Survey. And actually, let me start with this slide. How about that? I run the Coordinated Hazard Assessment and Mapping Program, and the Illinois State Water Survey is part of the Prairie Research Institute, which is inside of the University of Illinois. So we've got quite a few layers of ways of describing who we are and where we are. But CHAMP is the shorthand that we use around here to talk about ourselves, and we are a state cooperating technical partner. We are in partnership in that effort with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. And the way that this is kind of split up is that the Department of Natural Resources handles the regulatory aspect of floodplain management and floodway permitting. And the Illinois State Water Survey, as part of the University of Illinois, handles the mapping side of things. So we coordinate together on a joint business plan to develop priorities for mapping around the state. And as part of that, we share some of the responsibilities for how that gets done. The mapping program here at the Illinois State Water Survey has 28 full-time staff, and we're all certified floodplain managers. We're professional engineers. We're geographic information systems professionals. So we've got, and we've also got outreach specialists and planners. So we've got quite a large spread of expertise within our program. And we are 100% funded by FEMA for the flood insurance rate map work that we perform. That makes up probably about 80% of our annual budget in our program. And so we are quite dependent on the CTP grant. And as you know, we did not receive an FY25 grant this year, or I guess last year. And so we are still operating, but we're operating under funding that was already in place from previous grants. And we're delivering on the things that we promised to do as part of those grants. We do all the work in-house. I'll talk about that in a moment. But we are definitely in a strategic planning mode right now, and looking at how we might pivot to diversify our revenue and our projects. And we're looking for partnerships in other state agencies and watershed groups, planning organizations, direct community engagement, anything pretty much that might be able to leverage some of the skills and resources that we have in place here. And we're even open for opportunities outside the state of Illinois. So our technical capabilities and our model inventory and some of those kinds of resources really position us well for partnerships with other state agencies and other groups. But we do find that there's sort of really a circling of the wagons happening right now at a state level with agencies, and some agencies perform some of these things internally already. And so trying to find where we can hitch up with as a fallback plan has been challenging so far. But we have been in business, so to speak. We've been around for over 21 years, and we got into the MapMod program in November of 2004, and we started out digitizing the paper maps and making them into a digital product. But then in 2009, the risk map program fired up, and then we kind of shifted into actually performing the H&H studies that go onto the maps, not just recreating the paper maps in a digital form, but recreating the data and the studies that live in those maps. So, and that's we've been really focused on ever since then. So, as part of that, we cover basically all aspects of the mapping process, from discovery to data development, and then the mapping piece, of course. And with the mapping piece, that would include preliminary mapping and post-processing, and all the way through to final map production. So we've got something of an assembly line, you could say, of people working on all those things for each of the projects here in Illinois. And we cover all the flood insurance rate map updates for the state. There's other partners that sometimes bring certain information into those maps, but ultimately we're the ones publishing them. We also do the letter map revision review partner program. We've been doing that since 2009, I believe, as well. Currently, we are paused on that because we did not receive funding for that activity, and so we had to we didn't have any other state money or any other funds to accommodate that process, so we had to pass that responsibility back to FEMA, and so that's gone back to the FEMA contractors to handle that for now. We hope it's temporary, but we'll see again what 2026 brings. We also perform community outreach and mitigation strategies projects, those comms projects that you heard Laura Algeo mention. So we do span the gamut there. This is a picture of, well, a couple of pictures from one of our websites, that our primary website that we use to host information for our communities. It's illinoisfloodmaps.org. And on the left-hand picture, you see some footprints of active H&H modeling and analysis that's underway, or it's recently been completed, and it's not yet into the flood insurance rate maps. This map, we call it the Destined for DFIRMs map. So this is helping our communities know where we're doing work and what to expect to come out at some point in the future. The right-hand map shows sort of the status of each of the counties in Illinois. I'm happy to say that after over 20 years, we've at least finally touched every county in the state with some part of our process. And it doesn't mean that all the maps are as good as we hope that they would be, but they're at least some step towards getting everything digitized. Because up until about 2 years ago, or even a year ago, we still had about 3 or 4 counties that were still paper maps. And we're at least to the point where we've covered everything with some level of activity now. But now we're ready to go back to recycle everything again, because it's been a long time, 20 plus years. So it's time to get back to places we already were. And as part of being a cooperating technical partner and operating in all areas of the state, we do get to interact with lots of communities and the local officials. And when we are in those areas doing work for FEMA, we many times have other opportunities to interact with communities and help them with other activities, other projects, other things. As an example, we have done a series of what we'll call post-event analyses, where we happen to be working in a watershed, and there happens to be a flood event, a major event. And so since we're already doing work there and we already have models, many times they may be a two-dimensional model. And that's what the case is in this example, where we had a major storm come through in 2024, city of Nashville, Illinois. And what we were able to do is basically use a rain-on mesh approach to model the actual storm event that came through, and put that into our two-dimensional model, and see how that reflected on what was experienced on the ground. And in this particular exercise, the reason we were doing that was so that we could help the city refine their evacuation plan, because the version of an evacuation plan for this particular dam, which filled up and started overflowing, they realized that their evacuation plan was not as refined as it could have been. They basically had a big square shape or trapezoidal shape plop down in this area to say this is the evacuation area, but it didn't coincide with the ground truth of what was really going on, and so it created quite a bit of confusion. So we were able to actually show with our models where the water would be expected to flow and match that to where it actually did flow. And that was a value for the communities that we were able just to leverage that while we were in the area. Another example of leveraging some relationships that we have with communities when we're on the ground, we like to say that we don't just give you new flood maps, but we tell you what to do with them, basically, or help you know, like having the information is one thing, but doing something with it is a whole other thing. And that's the action that is important. So one of those things is hazard mitigation planning. And we have a group or a team within our group that actually does prepare these hazard mitigation plans for communities. And many times these plans are actually necessary to receive federal funding for disaster assistance, and they expire every 5 years. So a lot of communities are in a kind of a constant cycle of getting these updated and reviewed and updated, and so we can be there as a local partner to help them with that and actually perform this work for them. We set up contracts with those communities to do this kind of work, and there's usually state pass-through funds that end up paying us to do that, but those mechanisms are, kind of case to case. But that does add a lot of value for our ability to sort of help a community use the information that we're giving them and take real actions. Another aspect of things where we've leveraged our studies and the results of our models before is in the area of policy development. And the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, MWRDGC, that is an agency that worked with us over the course of 3 different phases of a project to evaluate their stormwater management requirements for release rates in different watersheds that they are responsible for. So we were able to take those models. Those were models that were developed for a detailed watershed plan by consultants in that area, and we were able to leverage that information and produce evaluations that looked at some scenario planning, that what if we instituted, or what if MWRD initiated watershed release rates at this rate for this watershed? How does that impact things downstream? Because we all know that just because you store the water on site and let it go slowly doesn't mean that you're preventing the potential of downstream impacts, because the way that hydrographs can combine and the temporal aspect of how watersheds work, sometimes it might make more sense to let the water out faster from a certain location so that it doesn't combine up at an inopportune time elsewhere downstream and create impacts downstream. So we're able to look at scenario planning with that and recommend some very specific release rates for specific watersheds that they were able to integrate into their updated stormwater regulations. And in fact, that even led to looking at water quality aspects of things and constituents in water that run off from roads and the ground, and being able to use these same models to help study that aspect too. And that was kind of another partnership that we had internally here at the University of Illinois to do that aspect. So those were some fruitful outcomes from our FEMA work. And the last one I'm going to share with you is what we call our structures at flood risk product. SAFER is how we abbreviate that. And this is another thing that we partner with the Department of Natural Resources here in Illinois. And it's essentially a database of structures of houses or buildings that have been surveyed by real people in the field, surveyors that go on the ground and with a rod and a level, and they shoot the first floor elevation and the low entry point where water can get in, take pictures, and then we take pictures of the buildings so that we know what kind of structure they are. That is then integrated into a database that includes damage curves, so that we then can take depth grids that we've developed for the FEMA products, the FEMA mapping, intersect that with the building footprints, intersect that with the depth damage curves to come up with potential loss damages that could be expected for certain levels of flooding. We look at a series of different flooding events to create these databases, and then we make this available to the community officials in a web portal. And this is just an example of what that web portal might look like if you were to log in as a community official. And we don't give this out. That's password protected. We don't give it out to everyone in the community, but we would encourage any community members to come into their floodplain administrator's office and have a look at with them if they wanted to know details. And one reason for that, that was actually a state request that we do it that way because we wanted to make sure the information was being used the most appropriately. But it also is a great tool for communities as they're planning for mitigation projects so that they can make decisions based on actual potentially dollars being a dollar's value based on not just a footprint of where it might flood, but where is it going to cost the most. So if you're going to do buyouts, you could use this as a tool to help identify the best bang for your buck for where you should buy out things. And that way it kind of takes some of the politics out of the decision. If you're the floodplain administrator or the mayor or somebody like that, and you have a buddy or something that, you want to have a scientifically justified reason for picking the houses that you buy out. And this is one way to do that. So these are not funded by FEMA. All these last number of projects that I just showed you are just ancillary side things that we've done because we are doing the work for FEMA. And so that goes to show that the Cooperating Technical Partner Program is bearing fruit in Illinois. We just wish it was also bearing funds. So at this point, I'll finish up, and I guess we'll have questions next.
Yeah, Glenn, thank you so much. We are going to have a little bit of time for Q&A. Before I get into it, though, I do want to ask you all to just give our webinar a quick rating today. So I'll open up a poll and you can respond to that over the next few minutes, and I'll leave it open. Okay, and Glenn, since we were just hearing from you, Megan had a question during your presentation, and forgive me if you addressed this, I was responding to somebody else, but Megan was asking, are they using survey data or GIS data to create the models? So I don't know. Hopefully that's specific enough.
We have lots of different, we do detailed studies, and we do approximate studies, and we do BLE studies, base level engineering studies. So it depends on what FEMA is paying us to work on, or what the priorities are. But when we do detailed studies, we do field survey work where we do work with private contractors and also with the Department of Natural Resources, who has a surveying team to go out and collect field data. We organize where those cross sections need to be obtained in the field, and then we integrate those into our either 1D or 2D models. And of course, if it's an approximate study, it may just be a GIS-based exercise using the latest LiDAR data. So it depends on the purpose of the study.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
Kevin, we don't see the poll, but I don't know, maybe the speakers don't.
Yeah, it's open. Everyone's responding.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Manny, we had a question for you. Noah was asking, how does section 251004, the insurance code, work for Texas? So, are you able to just elaborate a little bit more on that, I guess?
Yes. So 251 basically talks about the maintenance tax, and that's the money that gets put into that floodplain management account. So basically, it just basically says, hey, like we're gonna create this account and we're gonna take this money and move it over here so that it can be used for the different floodplain roles themselves. So that's the thing about, I don't know, statute is like it always refers to something else and then it refers to something else. And so you kind of have to chase it around a little bit to to kind of get, where it started. But 251 basically establishes the maintenance tax and where it is, and then how much money of that maintenance tax gets placed for us to use.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for laying that out there like that. We have one question left, so we may be able to give you back a minute or two of your afternoon here. But before I ask it, I want to let everyone else know who may have asked a question. A lot of them were answered in writing. So if you asked a question, go ahead and navigate back to the Q&A area, and you may see an answer to your question in writing there. Last question from Peter. He's saying, how do I become a cooperating technical partner? I'm in Wyoming, so I don't know if there's a concise answer or we want to hear from several people in the group. I think we've heard a lot of good stories today, but Peter in Wyoming's wanting to know how to become a CTP.
So I'm gonna say the way to do that would be to contact your region. Wyoming is in Region 8, which is also where Brooke is. So I would maybe suggest reach out to Brooke and she could probably give you some insights on who to contact because I know staff's been changing a lot and what you might need to do there. Brooke, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So my email has already been in a couple of the answers, so you should be able to figure out how to reach out to me.
Okay, well, wonderful. That's it for us today. Like I said at the top, we'll be following up with certificates of attendance, any resources that were requested that we share today, um, and any other promised follow-up. So that email will come between 1 and 2 weeks from now. And if you have any other questions at that time, you can reach out to me. But I just want to say thanks everybody for hanging in there with us this afternoon and especially to our presenters, Brooke, Glenn, Joanna, Manny, and especially Laura, taking the time out of your afternoon to share these perspectives with us has been really great. A lot of good feedback and comments so far, I can tell already. So just a big thank you. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your week. Take care.